I am Lisa.
And I am Eric. In each episode, we explain common English words and phrases in simple language.
So let's start and make English simple together. Okay, what are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is clumsy. Then we will continue with as if and as for. Then as of. And the final one is from scratch.
Let's start with the first word, Eric.
The first word today is clumsy.
Clumsy.
Clumsy is an adjective we use to describe someone who often drops things, falls or bumps into things. It can also describe actions that are done without skill or grace. For example, John is so clumsy that he often spills his drink.
Good example. It means that John frequently drops or spills his drink because he's not very careful or coordinated.
Exactly. Now, Lisa, can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's my example. The clumsy waiter dropped a tray of glasses. It means that the waiter wasn't careful or skillful, and as a result, he dropped the tray with glasses on it.
That's right. Clumsy is an adjective, so we use it to describe people or actions like a clumsy person or clumsy movements. For example, he is clumsy or it was a clumsy movement.
Good point, Eric. Now let's listen to a short dialogue using our word clumsy.
Oh no! I just broke another plate!
Don't worry, Emma. It happens to everyone sometimes.
But I'm always so clumsy in the kitchen. I feel bad about it.
You're not that clumsy. You're just learning. I used to be really clumsy when I started cooking, too.
In the dialogue, Emma and Jack used the word clumsy several times.
Yes, they did. Eric, have you ever felt clumsy?
Oh yes, many times. I'm quite clumsy when I try to dance. I always step on people's feet.
Really? That's funny. I'm clumsy too, especially in the morning before I'm fully awake.
Oh, what happens when you're clumsy in the morning, Lisa?
Well, sometimes I bump into furniture or drop my toothbrush. How about you? When are you most clumsy, Eric?
I'm most clumsy when I'm in a hurry. I often drop things or forget important items.
I understand that. Being in a hurry can make anyone clumsy. Do you think being clumsy is always bad?
Not always. Sometimes it can be funny and it teaches us to laugh at ourselves.
That's a good point. I think everyone is clumsy sometimes, and that's okay.
Exactly. We shouldn't feel bad about being clumsy. It's just part of being human.
Well said, Eric. That's all we have time for with our word, clumsy. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is as if.
As if.
It's an idiom. This idiom is used to describe something that appears to be true but may not be, or to make comparisons.
That's right, Eric. We use as if when we want to say that something seems something else.
Let me give an example. He acts as if he knows everything. It means that he behaves in a way that makes it seem like he knows everything, but he probably doesn't really know everything.
Here's another one. She danced as if no one was watching. It means that she danced freely, like she didn't care if people saw her.
Good example. Now, let's talk about how to use this phrase. As if is usually followed by a clause, which is a group of words with a subject and a verb. For example, as if it were summer, or as if she had won the lottery.
That's helpful, Eric. Let's hear a short dialogue using this phrase.
Hey Sarah, why are you dressed so nicely today?
I have a job interview. I want to look as if I already work there.
That's smart, and you're walking so confidently as if you've already got the job.
Thanks, Tom. I hope that confidence helps me in the interview.
I liked how they used as if twice.
Me too, Eric. What do you think about Sarah's approach?
I think Sarah is smart. She's trying to look and act like she fits the job already.
You're right. Have you ever acted as if for something, Eric?
Yes, I have. When I first started teaching, I acted as if I was very confident, even though I was nervous.
That's a good example, Eric. Did it help you?
Yes, it did. After a while, I really became confident. What about you, Lisa? Have you used as if in real life?
Yes, I have. Last week, I went to a party where I didn't know anyone. I acted as if I was outgoing and made new friends quickly.
That's a great way to use it.
Yes. I felt more comfortable and met nice people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, we hope this explanation and conversation help our listeners understand and use the phrase as if correctly.
Definitely. And remember, even if you're not sure, you can speak as if you're confident in your English. It will help you improve.
Great point, Lisa. Shall we move on to our next word?
Sure, Eric. What is the next word?
The next word is as for.
As for.
As for, an idiom. This idiom is used to introduce a new topic or to refer to a different person or thing in a conversation. We use as for when we want to change the subject or talk about something else. For example, I like pizza and pasta. As for dessert, I prefer ice cream. It means that I'm changing the topic from main dishes to dessert and talking about what I like for dessert.
Good explanation. Here's another one. Tom is going to the beach. As for me, I'm staying home. It means that I'm now talking about what I'm doing, which is different from what Tom is doing.
Now, let's talk about how to use this phrase. As for is usually followed by a noun or pronoun. For example, as for him or as for the weather.
That's helpful, Eric. Let's hear a short dialogue using this phrase.
Kids, what do you want for dinner?
I like chicken, Mom.
As for me, I'd prefer pasta.
Okay. And as for dessert, how about some fruit?
That was a nice dialogue, Lisa.
Yes. What do you think about how the family is deciding on dinner, Eric?
I think it's good that everyone gets to say what they want. The mother uses as for to ask about dessert separately.
You're right. Do you use as for when talking about food choices, Eric?
Yes, I do. When I go to restaurants with friends, I sometimes say, as for me, I'll have the fish.
That's a good way to use it. Do you use it in other situations too?
Sometimes, like when we're planning a trip, I might say, as for the hotel, I prefer one close to the beach. What about you, Lisa?
I use it when I'm shopping with friends. I might say, as for shoes, I like these red ones.
That's a great example. I think our listeners can learn from this too.
Absolutely. Remember, listeners, you can use as for to change the topic or talk about something else.
Yes, and it's a polite way to give your opinion or talk about something different in a conversation.
Well said, Eric. We hope this explanation and conversation help our listeners understand and use the phrase as for correctly.
Definitely. And remember, using phrases like as for can make your English sound more natural and fluent.
Great point, Eric. Okay, let's move on to the next word.
The next word is as of.
As of.
As of is an idiom used to indicate a specific time or date when something begins or changes. Here's an example sentence. As of next week, the new rules will be in effect.
It means that starting next week, the new rules will be in effect.
Here's another example. As of today, we have a new manager.
It means that starting today, there is a new manager.
Now, let's briefly discuss some grammar related to as of. This phrase is used before a specific time or date to indicate when something starts or changes. For example, as of January 1st, or as of now.
Great. Now, let's have a short dialogue using the phrase as of. In this dialogue, we'll have two co-workers, Steve and Karen, talking about changes at their office.
Did you hear about the new work schedule?
Yes, as of Monday, we will start at 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m.
That sounds good to me. As of now, I can get an extra hour of sleep.
Me too. I think everyone will appreciate the extra time in the morning.
Now, let's talk about our dialogue. Lisa, what do you think about the changes in Steve and Karen's work schedule?
Based on the dialogue, starting Monday, they will begin work at 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. They both seem happy about the extra hour of sleep.
And also, they seem pleased with the change, and it looks like the new schedule will be better for them. Have you ever experienced a change that started as of a specific time, Lisa?
Yes, my gym introduced new classes as of last month, which I've been enjoying. How about you, Eric?
As of last week, a new project manager started to work at work. Do you think using as of helps to clarify when changes take place?
Yes, it clearly shows when something starts, making communication clearer. What do you think?
I agree. It's an effective way to specify timing. Do you know any other phrases that mean the same as of?
Yes, phrases like starting from and beginning have similar meanings. Anything else you want to add about our phrase today?
Just remember that as of is used to indicate a specific time or date when something begins or changes. It's a useful phrase for clear communication.
It's a good summary, Eric. Okay, we have reached the last word of today. What is the last word today, Eric?
The last word is from scratch.
From scratch.
This idiom means to make or do something from the beginning without using anything that was prepared before.
That's right, Eric. We often use from scratch when talking about cooking or creating something new.
Let me give an example. My grandmother makes her cakes from scratch. It means that she doesn't use a cake mix or pre-made ingredients. She starts with basic ingredients like flour, sugar, and eggs.
Good example. Here's another one. We built our tree house from scratch. It means that we didn't use a kit or pre-made parts. We started with just wood and tools and made everything ourselves.
Now, let's talk about how to use this phrase. From scratch usually comes at the end of a sentence or after a verb. For example, she learned to play guitar from scratch, or they started the business from scratch.
Okay, Eric. Let's hear a short dialogue using this phrase.
Wow, Sarah, this soup is delicious. Did you make it from scratch?
Yes, I did. I love cooking from scratch whenever I have time.
That's impressive. I usually just heat up canned soup.
You should try cooking from scratch sometime. It's fun and often healthier.
That was a nice dialogue, Lisa. I liked how they used from scratch 3 times.
Me too, Eric. Now, let's talk about the dialogue. What do you think about Sarah's cooking?
I think Sarah enjoys cooking and takes pride in making things from scratch. It seems like she thinks it's better than using pre-made food.
You're right. Do you ever cook from scratch, Eric?
Sometimes, yes. I make pancakes from scratch on weekends. It's not too hard, and they taste better than the mix.
That sounds yummy. What ingredients do you use?
Just flour, eggs, milk, and a little sugar. What about you, Lisa? Do you make anything from scratch?
I like to make pizza from scratch. I make the dough and sauce myself.
Wow, that sounds delicious. Is it difficult to make pizza dough from scratch?
It takes some practice, but it's not too hard. And it's fun to choose your own toppings.
I think our listeners can learn from this too. Making things from scratch can be rewarding.
Absolutely. Remember, listeners, from scratch means starting from the beginning with basic ingredients or materials.
Yes, and while it might take more time, making things from scratch can be a great way to learn new skills.
Well said, Eric. We hope this explanation and conversation help our listeners understand and use the phrase from scratch correctly.
Definitely. And remember, whether it's cooking, crafting, or learning English, sometimes starting from scratch is the best way to really understand something.
Great point, Eric. All right, that's all for today's episode of Simply Explained English. We hope you found it helpful and fun.
Please subscribe and like the video and practice the words of today.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for more simple explanations of English words and phrases.
Until then, keep practicing and keep learning. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Welcome, I am Lisa.
And I am Eric. Whether you're just starting your English journey or looking to improve your skills, this podcast is perfect for you.
So let's get started and make English easy. What are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is back-to-back. Then we will continue with seldom and errand. Then to show up. And the final one is cut corners.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word is back-to-back.
Back-to-back.
Back-to-back. This phrase means doing things one after another without a break in between. It can also mean two people standing with their backs touching each other.
That's right, Eric. Let's give some examples to help our listeners understand better.
Sure. Here's my example. I had 3 meetings back-to-back today. It means that I had 3 meetings, one right after another, without any breaks between them.
That's a good example. Here's mine. The athletes stood back-to-back to compare their heights. This means that the athletes stood with their backs touching each other to see who was taller.
Great! Now, let's use back-to-back in a short dialogue. Are you ready, Lisa?
Yes, I'm ready, Eric.
Hey, Sarah, how was your weekend?
It was busy, Jack. I watched 2 movies back-to-back on Saturday night.
Wow, that's a lot of screen time. Which movies did you watch back-to-back?
I watched The Lion King and then Frozen. It was a fun animation night.
That was a nice dialogue, Lisa. It shows how we use back-to-back to talk about doing things one after another.
Yes, it does. Eric, do you ever watch movies back-to-back?
Sometimes I do, Lisa. Last month, I watched 3 Harry Potter movies back-to-back. It took almost all day.
That's a long time. Did you take breaks between the movies?
No, I didn't. That's why we say they were back-to-back. I started one right after the other finished.
I see. It's important for our listeners to know that back-to-back doesn't change its form. We don't say back-to-back or backing-to-back.
Exactly. It's a simple phrase to use once you understand its meaning.
Do you think watching movies back-to-back is a good way to learn English, Eric?
It can be, Lisa. It helps you hear a lot of English at once. But it's important to take breaks and think about what you've heard.
I agree. Maybe watching one movie, taking a break to think about it, and then watching another would be better for learning.
That's a good idea. You still get to enjoy 2 movies, but you have time to process the language.
I agree, Eric. Well, that's all we have time for with back-to-back. Shall we move on to our next word?
Yes, let's do that. Our listeners know how to use back-to-back correctly now. All right, our next word is seldom.
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 Let's explore what seldom means, Eric.
Seldom is an adverb meaning not often or rarely. We use it to describe things that don't happen very frequently. For example, I seldom eat fast food.
Perfect. That means you don't eat fast food very often, maybe just once or twice a year.
Yes, Lisa. Now, can you share another example?
Sure thing. How about, my grandmother seldom uses the internet.
That's a good one. It means your grandmother doesn't use the internet very often. She might prefer other ways of getting information or staying in touch. Now, let's talk about where to place seldom in a sentence. It usually comes before the main verb, but after auxiliary verbs like is, have, or can. For example, he seldom goes to the movies or they have seldom visited us.
Exactly. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using seldom.
Hey Sarah, how about going to the beach this weekend?
That sounds nice. I seldom get a chance to go to the beach.
Really? I thought you lived near the coast.
I do. But I seldom have free time. I'm usually busy with work.
Well, I'm glad you can make it this time. We seldom hang out these days.
You're right. We should do this more often.
That was great. Tom and Sarah used seldom several times.
Yes, they did. Eric, is there something you seldom do?
I seldom cook complicated meals. I usually stick to simple dishes. How about you, Lisa?
I seldom wake up early on weekends. I love to sleep in when I can.
Interesting. Do you think it's good or bad to do something seldom?
It depends. Sometimes it's good to seldom do unhealthy things, like eating junk food.
True, but it might be bad to do healthy things seldom, like exercising.
You're right. I seldom think about it that way. Are there any habits you want to do more often?
I want to read more. I seldom read books these days, but I'd like to change that.
That's a great goal, Eric. Maybe we can start a book club and talk about books on our podcast.
Awesome idea. We seldom talk about our hobbies here.
Definitely. We should do that more often. Well, that's all the time we have for seldom. Let's move on to our next word. What's the next word, Eric?
The next word is errand.
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 Okay, let's explain what errand means. An errand is a short trip, to do a task or to get something. We often do errands to buy groceries, pick up laundry, or go to the post office.
That's right, Lisa. Let me give an example sentence. I need to run some errands this afternoon. It means that I have a few short trips to make to complete some tasks this afternoon.
Good example, Eric. Here's another one. She runs errands for her elderly neighbor. It means she helps her elderly neighbor by doing tasks like shopping or picking up prescriptions.
Perfect. Now, let's talk about how to use errands. We usually use run with errands because it means to go out and do those small tasks. We can also use do errands as well, but we don't use make errands.
Great. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using our word errands.
Hey, Emily, what are you doing this weekend?
I have to run some errands on Saturday. I need to go to the bank and the grocery store.
Oh, I see. I also need to run some errands. Maybe we can go together.
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. We can help each other out.
Great. Let's meet at 10 a.m. and get our errands done.
That was a nice dialogue. John and Emily used the word errands a couple of times.
Yes, they did. Now, Lisa, do you have any errands to run this weekend?
Yes, I do. I need to pick up some dry cleaning and go to the pharmacy. How about you, Eric?
I need to get my car washed and buy some groceries. Do you think running errands is fun or boring?
I think it can be both. Sometimes it's nice to get things done, but other times it can be a bit boring.
I agree. It depends on the errands. Shopping for groceries can be fun, but waiting in line at the bank is usually boring.
That's true. Eric, do you ever run errands for other people?
Yes, I sometimes help my neighbors with their errands. It's a good way to be helpful.
That's very kind of you, Eric. Well, I think we have explained errand fairly enough. Let's move on to our next word. What's the next word, Eric?
The next word is show up.
Show up.
Show up. Show up is a phrasal verb that means to arrive or appear at a place, especially where you are expected to be. Let me give an example sentence. He didn't show up to the meeting yesterday. It means that he did not come to the meeting yesterday.
Good example, Eric. Here's another one. She always shows up on time for her classes. It means that she always arrives at her classes on time.
Perfect. Now, let's talk about how to use show up. This phrase is often used when talking about someone's presence at events, meetings, or other scheduled activities.
Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using our phrase show up.
Mark, did you see Jack at the party last night?
No, Sarah, he didn't show up. I wonder why.
That's strange. He usually shows up for all the events.
Yes, I hope everything is okay with him.
Now, let's talk about the dialogue, Eric. Do you think it's important to always show up on time?
Yes, I think it shows respect for others. What about you, Lisa?
I agree. Being late or not showing up can cause problems. Have you ever had an important event where someone didn't show up, Eric?
Yes, once I had a meeting and a key person didn't show up. It made things difficult. What about you?
Yes, I remember planning a party and one of my best friends didn't show up. I was worried about her. Why do you think people sometimes don't show up?
I think sometimes things come up or they forget, but it's always good to let others know if you can't show up.
Absolutely. Communication is very important. Well, that's all for the word show up. We hope you found it helpful. Okay, now it's time to explain the last word of today. What's the last word, Eric?
The last word is cut corners.
Cut corners.
Cut corners.
All right, let's explain what cut corners means. Cut corners is an idiom that means to do something in the easiest, cheapest, or quickest way, often ignoring rules or good standards to save time or money.
Exactly, Lisa. Let me give an example sentence. The builder cut corners by using cheap materials. It means that the builder used low-quality materials to save money, even though it wasn't the best choice.
Good example, Eric. Here's another one. If you cut corners on your homework, you might get a bad grade. It means that if you don't do your homework properly and just rush through it, you might not get a good grade.
Good example. Now, let's talk about how to use cut corners. This phrase is usually used in negative situations, showing that cutting corners is not a good idea.
Exactly. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using our phrase, cut corners.
Hey, Jack, have you seen the new office building?
Yes, I have. But I heard they cut corners during construction.
Really? How so?
They use cheaper materials to save money. Now, there are problems with the plumbing.
Oh no, that's not good. Cutting corners never ends well.
That was a useful dialogue. Sophie and Jack used the phrase cut corners a couple of times.
Yes, they did. Now, let's talk about cut corners. Do you ever cut corners?
Sometimes, but I try not to. For example, I never cut corners when I'm cooking.
I agree. Cutting corners can lead to problems. I never cut corners when it comes to my work. Do you think there are situations where it's okay to cut corners, Lisa?
Maybe in small tasks where it doesn't really matter, like folding laundry. But in important tasks, it's better to do things properly. What do you think?
I think you're right. It's important to do things well, especially when others depend on you.
Remember, listeners, don't cut corners when you study English.
It's good advice, Lisa. I totally agree with you. Okay, we have reached the end of today's podcast. That's it for today's episode.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.